Okay, so let's start today's special lecture program on behalf of the Department of Philosophy, University of Gour, Banga. I welcome everyone to this special lecture program, which is going to be delivered. The lecture is going to be delivered by Professor Madhucchanda Sen, who is a very well-known figure in the philosophical community, and she will be delivering an exciting area, which is a very interesting one. The name I call myself. We welcome Professor Madhucchanda Sen. Thank you, madam, for in spite of your busy schedule, we are all of us know that what kind of situation we are going through for 1 week or more in terms of the forthcoming semester examinations, and the faculty members of Jadavpur University also they have UG, PG, MPhil, PhD, and everything. So, and in spite of everything, Professor Sen has kindly agreed to deliver her lecture, and we welcome you, madam, and we welcome everyone. Professor Sharad Deshpande, Professor Amita Chatterjee. We can see they are the people who inspire us always, and I welcome my colleagues, Professor Sukumar Chandra Rai, Professor Jhareshwar Ghosh, Professor Jyotsna Saha, Dr. Sader Ali, Shampa Rai, every student, research scholars from any place throughout West Bengal, and in fact even beyond West Bengal, and many of them are Professor Madhucchanda Sen's students, and we are very happy to have all of you, and in this pandemic situation, at least through Google Meet, we are able to arrange this lecture program, and so that it can be reached out to many interested persons. So once again, I welcome our respected speaker, Professor Madhucchanda Sen, and everyone, faculty members, research scholars, eminent figures from the philosophical community. And the theme of the lecture today, as I mentioned already, is the name I call myself. But before Professor Sen starts delivering her lecture, I request my colleague Professor Jhareshwar Ghosh to please introduce her formally. We all know her, but there might be people who will be interested to know about her a little bit, and of course we all will listen to her after Professor Jhareshwar Ghosh introduces Professor Madhucchanda Sen. Jhareshwar, please.
Thank you, Purva. Thank you all, faculty members from my department, faculty from other departments, teachers from different colleges, distinguished participants, students, research scholars, for being here in the special lecture program. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our resource person today, Professor Madhucchanda Sen. Is a learned scholar, Professor of Philosophy, Department of Philosophy, Jadavpur University, who is going to talk to us about the name I call myself. The name I call myself. He has prepared a very relevant and thought-provoking topic for the students and research scholars of philosophy. This is a subject in which we should all be deeply interested, because it refers to properties to which we feel a special sense of attachment or ownership. Someone's personal identity in this sense consists of those properties she takes to differ her as a person or make her the person she is, and which distinguish her from others. Professor Madhucchanda Sen is well known to all. Is best known for her critical and analytic writings. As a professor of philosophy, she has committed her academic career to teaching and research, mostly in the areas of philosophy of mind, philosophy of language, analytical philosophy, philosophy of cognitive science, metaphysics, epistemology, logic, and phenomenology. She is the author of Externalism and the Mental, Introduction to Critical Thinking, Logic with Stan Barnett, Critical Thinking, Academic Writing and Presentation Skill with Marilyn Anderson and Pramod Nair, co-author of Indian Folk Psychology, Experiencing Self, Empiricism and the Two Dogmas, Language and Communication. Apart from this, he has scholarly published many articles in the reputed journals and books and anthology. Today, he will be sharing with us our expert philosophical views on the name I call myself. I ask all our students and research scholars to give your attention, full attention to Madhucchanda Didi. With these few words, without any delay, I invite Madhucchanda Didi to deliver her lecture. Thanks. It's Madhucchanda.
Namaskar, everybody. It is a great privilege for me to be able to be with you, even though virtually, and to be able to speak at the University of Gour, Banga, a place where many of my friends have been working for a long time, but I have not had the good fortune of being with them physically at the university. So even though I cannot be there physically, it is great to be with you all. And I thank especially my two very dear friends, Purbayon and Harishar, who approached me to deliver this lecture. And I also thank the other members of the department for having me here. It is also a great joy to see some of my mentors here, Professor Chatterjee and Professor Deshpande, and of course all my students and friends. So hello everybody. This talk, which I call the name I call myself, is a follow-up of an article that was published in 2015 in an anthology, which is a group research conducted by our Philosophy of Mind reading group, which is hosted in Jadavpur University. Well, when I wrote this article, the thoughts about this area were in a very nascent stage, and ever since then, I have been thinking and rewriting, and I have also presented it in front of other gatherings. And I keep changing what I had written then, and I am still working on it. So it is a paper still, you know, a work in progress paper. I would right away tell you that I really don't have many answers to give you, but I take the opportunity to raise a few questions that have been, you know, troubling me, have been vexing me, and questions that I find are, to me, extremely interesting. Well, when Purbayun announced the name of this lecture on Facebook, many of my non-philosophical friends responded to it. So, since the name was the name I call myself, a very, very witty friend of mine wrote back, "But Madhucchanda, I don't call myself any names." So I at once retorted that you just did. You used I. So, friends, we are going to talk about the first person singular pronoun, the I. So, I start off with a usual place where usually people who talk about the indexical I in philosophy of language start. I start off with a paper called The Problem of the Essential Indexical, written by John Perry in 1979. And John Perry actually starts off with a story. And I find that story extremely funny and interesting. And I find this story to be really bringing right in front of us the main issue that I want to address here. And I'm quoting from Perry. Perry writes, "I once followed a trail of sugar on a supermarket floor, pushing my cart down the aisle on one side of the tall counter and back the aisle on the other, seeking the shopper with the torn sack to tell him that he was making a mess. With each trip around the corner, the trail became thicker, but I seemed to be unable to catch up. Finally, it dawned upon me I was the shopper with the torn sack, and I was the shopper I was trying to catch." So you see, what Perry wants us to understand is that before it dawned upon him that it was he who was the clumsy shopper with a torn sack, he was in fact having some sort of a belief about himself. The belief that the shopper with the torn sack is making a mess. Now, the shopper with the torn sack was none else but him. So he did indeed have a belief about himself. However, when it dawned upon him that he is the clumsy shopper and it is he who is making a mess by, going around with a torn sack in his trolley, he has certainly a different sort of belief about himself. So, you see, even before realizing that he was the shopper with the torn sack in his trolley, he was entertaining a belief about himself. But while having this belief about himself, he was actually individuating himself as the shopper with the torn sack who was making a mess. And this belief is very different from the belief that dawns upon him after the revelation that I am making a mess. A belief that would at once make him, blush, make him, really feel guilty, be embarrassed, and prompt him to rearrange the sack in his tray and possibly apologize to other people. Anyway, a belief that would put him into a very different kind of action. Okay? So you see, thinking about oneself in the first person mode is very different from thinking about oneself in a third person mode. And this is where the significance of the word I, the first person pronoun I, becomes very crucial for philosophers. Now, I'm just reminded of an anecdote. You know, one of my friends who is now a very, one of my college mate, who's now a very famous philosopher of mind, Emma Borg. She was asked by her granny that, well, what was your MPhil thesis on? And she said, my MPhil thesis was on the, because she was writing on definite descriptions. And what is your PhD thesis on? It is on this. So, you know, we philosophers, especially we dinosaurs, the analytical philosophers, we are very pedantic, and we speak about very apparently very trivial things, such as the this, or the, or some, or is, or I. So first of all, I would like to tell you why an analysis, a semantic analysis of the word I, the first person pronoun, is actually philosophically extremely interesting. I mean, there are many issues that are related to the use of the first person singular pronoun and how it is linked to the issues that we raise in philosophy of mind as well as philosophy of language. But I would like to concentrate on two important things that emerge from a study of the first person singular pronoun. Okay? The first is, and I am actually quoting from two very important philosophers who write on the issue, and they talk about why I is extremely important, why the analysis of the semantical nature of the use of I is very important for us. And the first person that I quote is Jose Luis Bermudez. He has a fine book called Understanding I, which came out in 2016 from OUP. He writes, there is a widely held belief that the distinguishing mark of self-conscious thought is the ability to speak and think about oneself using the first person pronoun I or any other comparable devices that may be available in other languages. So you see that Bermudez, and it is not only Bermudez, I mean Bermudez is just articulating this. Many philosophers think that there is a very close connection between our ability to be self-aware and our ability to, use the first person pronoun I or think in a way that involves this first person perspective. Okay, so this is one of the very important issues relating to our discussion about I, and I intend to really work on this. There's a second thing that I want to bring your attention to, and here I am quoting a very fine philosopher of mind and cognitive scientist, Ruth Millikan, and she writes in her article, The Myth of Mental Indexical, she writes, a strong contemporary current runs to the effect that the ability of an agent to project knowledge of the world into relevant action in the world depends on the ability to think indexical thoughts or I thoughts. So what Ruth Millikan is saying that for us to become agents and for us to be able to take relevant actions in order to, interact with the world, we need to be able to think indexical thoughts. Indexical thoughts or I thoughts, which characteristically get expressed in speech which involves the indexical I. Okay. Actually, in the first part of my talk, I shall be speaking on the literature that centers around the idea that I is an essential indexical and it has a very inalienable relationship with self-awareness. In other words, the view that self-reference and self-awareness go hand in hand in a very significant way. And in the second part, I would like to tell you how being able to have indexical thoughts or I thoughts and being able to use the first person singular pronoun seems to be a prerequisite, a requirement for agency itself. So you see, it is indeed an extremely important thing that we can only become full-fledged agents if we are able to entertain I thoughts and if we are able to put our I thoughts in words by using the indexical I. Okay? Now, first of all, let me try to say why Bermudez is saying that self-consciousness seems to require the capacity of entertaining I thoughts and the capacity to use the first person singular pronoun or some such device in the language that one speaks. I'm not saying that every language in the world has this first person singular pronoun, but every language seems to have a device of self-reference, okay, which makes it possible for a subject to express her I thoughts in language. Now, philosophers have actually quibbled about whether one of these capacities is a prerequisite of the other, in the sense that people have asked whether I need to be able to use the indexical I in order to be self-aware. Or some other people have said that in order to be able to use the indexical I need to be self-aware. Now, one might think that it is a little perverse to think that I need to first learn to use the first person pronoun and then alone I can entertain genuine I thoughts. But if you stop and think a little bit, maybe it is not so perverse. Maybe it is not so absurd. Often we say that children who have not yet developed a full-fledged sense of self, that is, they haven't developed full-fledged self-awareness, they usually use their own proper names when they talk about themselves. For example, it is only when a child, let us say Amy, when she starts saying, I want ice cream, instead of saying Amy wants ice cream, that we say that, okay, now Amy has become self-aware. Okay, so she has now developed a full-fledged sense of self. So it is not so absurd to think that our ability to use the first person singular pronoun is somehow a prerequisite of our being able to have self-awareness in the true sense of the term. but here I don't want to go into this. I'm just making a short reference, a small reference to, Frege's principle, where he says that any bona fide thought that we can entertain should be in principle expressible in language. Okay, so in that sense, expressibility is a mark that we really do have that thought. Now, this idea really opens doors to the discussion of I as the essential indexical. Philosophers of language have always thought that an investigation into the linguistic character of this first-person pronoun actually brings out beautifully the important and subtle differences that there is between our awareness of ourselves and our awareness of everything else. So by just looking into the semantic and syntactic character of the indexical I shall be able to understand why is it that my awareness of myself is very different from my awareness of anything else in the world. And this difference that is brought out is also brought out by the difference that we notice between reference to oneself using the first person pronoun like I or some similar devices in language, and referring to oneself using some third person mode of reference. Okay, so I mean, I do see a difference between referring to myself by the first person pronoun I when I say I am hungry, or I am going to deliver a lecture at Gour Vishwavidyalaya, when I'm saying this, and when I'm saying that Madhucchanda is going to deliver a lecture in Gour Vishwavidyalaya. So there is a marked difference between these two. And this actually caught the attention of a few philosophers in the middle of 20th century, and I would like to mention Hector Neri Castaneda and Sidney Schumacher and John Perry, who really brought this thing to our notice. Now, am I audible? Can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yes, Didi.
Okay.
You are.
Okay. Now,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to present one slide and then I'll come back. Just see if you can see this. Can you see this?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
It's opening, yes.
Do you think I should make it a little bigger? Hang on. I'm trying to make it bigger. Wait. Yeah, can you see it now?
No, madam. Actually, presentation is.
It's gone? Wait. Just a moment. Let me first find the slide and then I'm going to present. Please bear with me. Okay, can you see it now? Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you see there are three ideas that are central to the discussion of I as the essential indexical. The first is the use of I or similar devices in language is inalienably linked with the self-awareness. This is something that we already spoke about. The second, this idea was made famous first by Sidney Shoemaker, and then it was taken up by Gareth Evans, and I'm sure many of you know that this really takes up a huge literature, a huge amount of literature on this area. We are immune to the error through misidentification of another as oneself, and this is reflected by the use of the I. And three, when we refer to ourselves using I or some similar device in a language, we identify ourselves not as the bearer of some property. Okay? And I am going to really focus on the third point, which is a point that John Perry really takes up, and which actually has its mooring in the kind of discussion that we found regarding indexicals in Russell and Frege. So this is sort of the traditional take on the indexical I. So I start with that, and I slowly show how the kind of analysis that we get about I as an indexical, which really, the use of which really shows that while using I, we identify ourselves not as a bearer of some property. Okay, so this is for me the starting point. Okay, I stop presenting now. Am I back? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So as is brought by John Perry's clumsy shopper example, when we know ourselves in the first person mode, we are presented to ourselves in a very peculiar way, as if we are stripped of all our autobiographical properties or all our autobiographical details. This is what philosophers think is reflected by the semantics of the indexical I. If we read lessons from Russell, an indexical like I is really a purely referring expression whose only work is to refer. And a purely referring expression manages to refer without the use of any crutches. And the usual crutches that we have in mind are the crutches of definite descriptions. So the I refers to the subject without any crutches of definite descriptions that may apply to the subject. So this is really, for Russell, very much different from a proper name. So when I use the word I in speaking about myself, I use a purely referring expression. But when I use the word Madhucchanda Sen in talking about myself, then I'm using a proper name, which for Russell was only a description, a definite description in disguise. It could be the professor of philosophy at Jadavpur University. It could be the mother of Obon and Orko. It could be the daughter of so-and-so, the wife of so-and-so, the sister of so-and-so. So, whereas Madhucchanda Sen, the proper name is always associated with some description, and it is through those descriptions that the name manages to refer to the person who satisfies those descriptions. The indexical I, when I am using it, refers to me right away without having to depend upon any such descriptive crutches. Okay? Now this caught the imagination of many philosophers who are interested in the identity of self. Now, please note that I am now moving on from philosophy of language to philosophy of mind, or even metaphysics. So many people thought that, this really tells you about what the self is like. The meaning of I and the nature of the indexical I, and the very fact that it is a purely referring expression which refers to the subject without having to depend upon any descriptive conditions that the subject needs to satisfy in order that I be referred to it, this very fact really tells you what the self is like. So the self then sort of became identified with the reference of the indexical I. Obviously, if someone asks me, who are you? And I will say, I am I. Okay. Because if you think a little bit, you will understand that I could be I even if I wasn't born out of the parents that I'm born of. I could be I even if I didn't have many other biographical details applicable to me. So this is the thought. So you see that when philosophers understood that I is a genuinely referring expression of the Russellian kind, they at once started to think that self is an entity, even if we don't regard it as an ontological entity. The self could be regarded as an experienced entity which needs nothing more than its bare subjective presence to be identified. So we don't need anything more than this subjective presence to identify the self. Now my question is this what I mean by I? Are we bare subjective presences? Are we referring to bare subjective presences when we use the word I? And I would like to argue to the contrary. So I would like to say that, I refers to a far more meaty person. Okay. Now, notice that why is I regarded as an essential indexical? One of the big reasons that I is regarded the essential indexical is this, that no other third-person mode of referring can substitute this first-person mode of referring. Okay? Now, why is that? The reason why no other third-person mode of referring can substitute the first-person mode in which I am presented to myself when I have I thought is that I am presented to myself in a very distinctive mode. A mode that is unavailable to others. Nobody else can think of me in that mode. But it is here that all the problems crop up. The distinctive mode in which we think we are presented to ourselves is usually regarded as private. Okay? And in a way, private in the sense that I cannot share it with you. I I cannot ever tell you how I am presented to myself. And no matter how I try, you will probably fail to understand how I am presented to myself. So, the distinctive mode in which we think we are presented to ourselves is private and hence incommunicable. And there is a sense in which we actually do not want to communicate what we mean by I to the hearer when we use the word I. I mean, if by default I means this distinctively incommunicable way of referring to myself, this is not what I can or even desire to, communicate to the person I speak to. The question that we raise here is this. In order to respect the idea that we are presented to ourselves in a unique and possibly private way, are we to assume that the sense of the first person singular pronoun I is incommunicable? We are able to see that the problem that lies in the assumption of such an incommunicable sense of I, as soon as we ask ourselves the question, when is it that we need to use the indexical I? When do we use the word I? We need to use the word I whenever we need to communicate to others something about ourselves, right? When do I use the word I? When I want to tell you what I want. When I want to tell you how angry I am. When I want to tell you how happy I am. When I want to tell you how, wronged I feel by you, etc. So, if I may make a reference to P.S. Strawson, when I use the word what I'm doing is I am engaging in self-ascription. I'm ascribing something to myself. And I am doing so in order that you understand what is going inside me, okay? It is only within a speech context, that is within a speaker-hearer context, that we use the indexical I to make ascriptions to ourselves. So in that case, we need the I. In that case, we need the I to present me not in some private, mysterious, inaccessible way. Because when I present this to the other, I want the other to be able to access it. And the problem crops up, the problems that crop up here are not one. There are many problems that crop up. And if we look into the tradition, we will see that this has been addressed. The problems that crop up here have been addressed by not only the analytical tradition, it has equally been addressed by philosophers like Jadavpur Bhattacharya, who's a 17th century Nobunaya philosopher. I have written about Jadavpur Bhattacharya's response and Frege's response in my article. However, I'm not going to go into that. You will find a fine discussion on this in Jonardon Ganeri's Semantic Powers. Okay. Now, there are a few issues that are related to any indexicals whatsoever, which are also really making the issue of the indexical I problematic. As you all know that indexicals refer to different things in different contexts. For example, if I say I, it refers to Madhucchanda Sen. But if Purbayon says I, it refers to Purbayon. If, for example, Madhura, my student who's here, if Madhura says I, it refers to Madhura. Okay. If John Travolta says I, it refers to John Travolta. Just as other indexicals like this, that, here, now. Okay. And this really poses a problem for all realistic theories which identify meanings of words with their references. As you can see that words like I, this, now, here, these indexical words, they have a kind of inbuilt ambiguity because they may mean Madhucchanda Sen at one context and they may mean Purbayon Jha in a different context. But we do understand what is meant when an indexical or a demonstrative expression is used without being confused by this inbuilt ambiguity. I take an example. For example, I walk into a classroom in Darshan Bhavan and I see written on the board, I shall not take the class on, let's say, 12th of November. Okay. And I cannot recognize the handwriting. I do understand what I means here, in spite of the fact that I have no clue who this I is. And this really made philosophers make a distinction between the character of a sentence which has such an indexical or demonstrative inbuilt inside it and the content of a sentence that has such an indexical. So if I see I shall not be taking my class on 15th of November, I do understand the character of this sentence in the sense that I know that the person who wrote this on the blackboard is not going to take her class or his class. But when I recognize that handwriting as the handwriting of my colleague, Tomugno, then I know that it is Tomugno who is not going to take his class on 15th of November. Okay, so you see there is a difference between getting the content of the sentence which has an indexical in it and the character of it. Okay, and the similar distinction is being made by the Nobunoyaikos, where they say that, you know, the character of the sentence, which is a running element which is present in all sentences which have I in them, they call it the Onugama. But with regard to I, we must realize that this running element or the Onugama or the character or even the reference is not what we are trying to understand. That is not important. Okay, it is not enough for me to understand that the person who wrote this on the blackboard is not going to take the class on 15th of November. It is not enough for me to understand that Tomugno Sarkar is not going to take the class. That is not enough. When we understand I, when we truly understand the indexical character of the I, it would not be enough to know this. What we need to know is that I is an essential indexical. That is, it has inbuilt in it a unique way of presenting the subject to himself or herself. Okay? And in order to understand this meaning, we really need to get at this unique sense, this unique mode in which, by the use of the word I, the subject is presented to herself. Okay? Purbayon, am I audible? Everything is okay?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay. Now, John Perry starts off by critiquing Frege because he thinks that Frege, within the Fregean semantics, we really cannot do justice to the idea of the private sense that is associated with I. Okay? Why? Because for Frege, the sense of item is always objective, something that is in principle graspable by anybody. So if we think that I, in order to be an essential indexical, needs to have this private incommunicable sense attached to it, then it is difficult for us to find a place of I in Fregean semantics. Now, notwithstanding the importance of the unique and might be even private way in which we are presented to ourselves, the important question that I would like to ask is this, and I have asked this question earlier. What are the occasions in which we need to make the use of the first person pronoun I? And I would like to propose that I do not intend to express the privately available sense of myself when I use the pronoun I. The occasions in which we make use of this pronoun are occasions of interpersonal communication. These occasions also bring with them the realization that I am to the other another other. Okay? And it is this other that I am to another that I need to present on occasions of the use of the indexical I. So when I use the indexical I in the interpersonal communication setup, the I should not convey some private myself as the other in the eyes of the other. In the background of this, we must address the worry about incommunicable sense of I. I would like to say that interpersonal communication as much involves the understanding of one's otherness as the awareness of the other to whom I want to communicate. Well, I'm not going to go into that. That I leave for another day. In doing this, I shall deliberately avoid the detailed discussion of Frege or Gadadhara. Because for me, it is not important whether it is the running element or the content, the real reference, which is important. For me, it is important to understand whether indeed we need to grasp this privately, uniquely accessible sense in order to understand the word I, or is it that sense that I need to convey when I am using the indexical I? I voice my worry and I invite my audience to look anew at the first person singular pronoun, and I invite you to share my worries that actually cut across this Fregean and Nyaya understanding that the only problem with the indexical is how to capture both the running element and the unique content within a semantic theory. That is not my problem. Okay. So then what is it that I want you to understand? I want you to look into the two most important occasions in which I make use of the word I. One is the interpersonal communication, and I have already told you why I think that the sense that I want to convey in using the I is not some private sense which is inaccessible to the third person. The other possible context that we may use, in which we may use the first person singular pronoun, is in inner speech or soliloquy. Now, we usually think that the interpersonal communication scenario brings with it a threat of meaning loss or meaning distortion. Why? Because, I see myself in a particular way and I am presented to myself in a first person way when I entertain I thoughts and I express them by the use of the word I. And because you can never access that incommunicable private sense, there will be a loss of meaning. What I want to push is that when I'm speaking with myself, there may be a loss of meaning. There may be a threat of loss of meaning. I now question whether there is a threat of such loss of meaning in inner speech as well. In inner speech, we may use the indexical I to reflect upon ourselves or states of ourselves. These are occasions when we are acutely aware of ourselves. I mean, soliloquy is a pretty dramatic affair. Not every day that you talk to yourself. We do talk to ourselves, but they are, of course, we build up a lot of drama around ourselves because we are doomed to be narcissistic. So it is the reason that I talk about the drama is that, the drama really brings out that the I that I am talking to is not a very slim I, but a rather meaty I. There are at least some cases of such acute self-awareness where we are involved in a kind of appraisal of ourselves. We are making an appraisal, okay? Appraisal which could be moral, could be epistemic, or could be just pragmatic. This is especially true in the case where we see ourselves as agents. Okay, and this is where Ruth Millikan's point comes out. Okay. Now, I have argued elsewhere that in experience of shame, which gets expressed in inner speech, where we may use the word I, the I refers to a social agent. And in shame, I'm aware of myself as an object fallen in the eyes of the other. So this one expects to be and not be I one is. Consequently, there may well be room for distortion and room for loss of meaning, even in the case of inner speech, where there is no other, but you are talking to yourself. And even in this self-referential mode, there may be a kind of loss of meaning. Okay. And so, think again about, immunity to error through misidentification. That whole thing is brought to question. And you know that continental philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Martin Buber indicated to this when they state that our subjectivity is interpersonally constituted. And, I can not be just a mere subjective presence. Okay. But here again, we are faced with a host of worries. There may be a distinction between the person one experiences in self-experience And the person one names I when one ascribes those experiences or states to oneself. Philosophers have made distinctions between the self we experience and the self to whom we ascribe states in the context of interpersonal communication. You see, so I mean, when I have an I thought because I have, I have experiences, self-experiences, and when I express them in speech, there may be a loss of meaning. There is ample scope of distortion when we give voice to our self-experience. The voice we are for convenience calling the running element, the running element or anugama of Gadadhara Bhattacharya, that is the speaker, is never just the speaker. At least that is not what the speaker wants to convey. The speaker just doesn't want to convey that the speaker is saying this. No, he really wants to say, I am saying this. And the I can never be just this running element, the speaker. The speaker, while giving voice to herself or himself, is a socially, culturally moved speaker with social, cultural, or even gender identity. So to feel comfortable in thinking that there is indeed a running element in form of understanding the pronoun I as a short form of the speaker may not give us the kind of stability of meaning that we are looking for when we are looking for the meaning of I. Now, we may come to the content. We spoke about the character and the content and not the running element that is conveyed by the first person pronoun I. Needless to say that this content is fraught with mysteries. It seems that when we know the content of the first person pronoun I, as hearers, we know the identity of the speaker referred to by the pronoun I. To take my earlier example, the I, the content of the pronoun I, written in the sentence, I shall not be taking my class on 15th of November, written on the blackboard by my colleague, in what sense do I come to know the identity of the person conveyed by the pronoun I? It seems clear that in knowing his identity, I know some unique description that applies to him. First of all, there is the old problem, resurfacing here, is the descriptive mode in which I capture, in identifying her, that mode, is it the same mode in which he intends me to capture it? Is there a problem? I can hear a sound. Urbayon, am I audible?
Yes, actually, Shampa Bosu, please mute yourself. Shampa Bosu.
Okay. So obviously this is a simple problem that is there. When someone writes, I will not take the class on 15th of May, for example, Tom Ugno has written this. Probably Tom Ugno wants to say that the person who's going to teach you Bernard Williams is not going to take his class on 15th of November. But I get a different meaning because I associate a different description with I in this case when I identify the handwriting. Okay. So obviously, this I think is not a very big deal. So in the case of interpersonal communication, I does not actually express this unique sense, even if that unique sense is a definite description that that person, attaches to I. When we realize this, we wonder if there is indeed any unique sense associated even to the content, not the rolling element, the content of the first person pronoun. Or is it just a definite description, a descriptive specification, equally available to anybody else? Now, with a kind of perverse and deliberate relish, I'm going to make the whole problem more puzzling by asking, are we really presented to ourselves in some unique way? The way that we want to convey by the use of the first person pronoun, or the way in which we convey ourselves to ourselves when we entertain I thoughts. Of course, this relish with which I make this suggestion is regarded, can be regarded as either perverse or totally wrong-headed, as it is a kind of traditional assumption that we are indeed presented to ourselves in a unique way, and this really sort of constitutes the very idea of subjectivity and the very idea of the being of the self, and all the other epistemic ideas that are associated with this idea. The idea of first-person authority, Evans's famous idea of immunity of error through misidentification. So let us, for the time being, not engage in this perverse relish and assume that we are indeed presented to ourselves in some unique way. My question would be, what is this unique way? What is this unique way in which I am presented to myself? Should we understand this in terms of some unique description that I associate with myself, which is unavailable to others, in the sense that nobody else thinks of me in terms of that descriptive condition? Now, this definitely will retain first-person authority or epistemic privilege of the first person, but notice that this will definitely rob I of its indexical character. Okay, because then it would become again a Russellian definite description. So that definite description may be just available to me. We have to also remember that I may associate a description to myself which is unavailable to you, in the sense that you, or for that matter nobody, would ever associate that description with me. But that does not actually make it unique in the sense desired. We know that the logic of descriptions are such that they are multiply satisfiable. So there may be another person, okay, who is presented to herself by the same description, which again is unavailable to others vis-a-vis her. So the unique way in which I am presented to myself cannot be understood in terms of descriptions, because another person may be presented to herself in terms of that description. So my perverse worry again raises its head, and I ask whether we are indeed presented to us in some unique way. And even if we are, is it that way in which we are presented to us which we want to convey when we use the word I? Now, one may say that, okay, no, it's not a unique description that I associate with myself when I say that I am presented to myself in a unique way. And one may follow the lines of philosophers like Tom Nagel and say that the uniqueness that is involved in self-awareness and which is reflected in self-reference is a kind of phenomenal peculiarity, in the sense that there is something like to be me. What I would like to hint at here is that the unique or peculiarity that lies, the uniqueness or peculiarity lies not in the content, rather the mode in which I am presented to myself. Now, my worry is whether we do indeed express or even desire to express this unique mode. If you know what it is like to be me, I want you to know what it is like to be me. Can some phenomenal peculiarity be expressed by a pronoun? Is I that very special pronoun which is capable of, communicating this phenomenal peculiarity? So maybe this is not what people desire or can even communicate by the use of the pronoun I. The closest that we can get to this unique mode in which another person is presented to herself is by paying attention to the unique mode in which we are presented to ourselves and understand that she must be presented in some such peculiar mode. Okay. But we never get that specific mode. But that definitely is not the content of the expression I, because the mode in which I introspect into myself is by default incommunicable. We can only project our unique mode to others, but never know what it is like to be her or him. So we may justifiably conclude that I, the first person singular pronoun, has a kind of descriptive content when used in the context of interpersonal communication. But then why do we have to give I the status of the Russellian logically proper name, the purely referring expression? Probably we have in mind the unique mode in which I am presented to myself, which is not some descriptive specification and is peculiar to each person referred to by the term I. Now, I'm getting to the end of my talk. Finally, I pose this question. Do I convey this unique mode when I use the pronoun I, even in inner speech? I would like to say that even in the case of inner speech, I do not want to convey by the word I this unique mode. If we look into the occasions where I might want to refer to myself in inner speech, we will see that these are occasions of acute self-reflection, acute self-awareness. Awarenesses that are closely tied with agency. The most common cases of such inner self-reflection and such talk with oneself are occasions where we are having to make decisions. We are having to make appraisals of situations in which we find ourselves, and where we are having to make appraisals of ourselves as agents. I say to myself, I should have put in a lot more work in writing this paper, or something more dramatic. I am ashamed that I took so long to write this paper. Here I refers to a person who usually meets her deadlines on time, who is expected to write something worth reading, etc. It is this I that I experience. It is this I that experiences a fall in her own eyes, in experiences of shame, embarrassment, as in the case of the clumsy shopper. He's embarrassed. Maybe he's also ashamed if he's a little dramatic. As is clear by now, this I has a descriptive content associated with it. It is not the unique mode in which I present myself, but the picture of myself that I, as a socio-cultural being, have painted to myself, that is in play when I talk to myself in the first person mode. Okay? And I would like to read out from Jose Luis Bermudez. Much of our commitment to our agency stems from this. Indeed, it stems from self-reference and self-awareness. But the self in question is not really the slim self that Russell would like the self to be, so that the indexical I would be a genuine, logically proper name which refers without any, without having to depend upon any descriptive crutches. Okay. Bermudez writes that I is the linguistic manifestation of the agent's ability to integrate beliefs about the world with her own first-person perspective on the world. And it is through this that the agent becomes an agent and is okay. And I am not belittling the fact that, when, for example, someone says that, the person who has 1,000 rupees in her purse needs to submit her question paper today. Okay, I don't feel that responsibility that I need to, submit my question paper today. It is only when I realize that I am the person who has 1,000 rupees in my purse and I am the person who has to, submit her paper, that I'm, my agency starts working. I understand that. I appreciate that. And in this sense, it is an essential indexical. But that does not mean that the meaning of this essential indexical needs to be understood in terms of some private, unique mode of presentation of myself to myself. Or this need not be understood in terms of the Russellian, genuine referring expression, which has no descriptive content at all inbuilt in it. Okay, so this is my take on I. And in view of all these worries that I am facing, I would like to initiate a new way of looking into the name that I call myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Madhucchanda Sen. I think it's getting echoed. It was a fascinating lecture, madam, and many. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. You are.
And many facets of the I, the deeply mysterious I, have been revealed, and it also reminds us many other possibilities, like the autobiographical consciousness, which
I can't hear you. I can't hear you properly. Can everybody else mute themselves so that I can hear Purbayon properly, please?
Yes. Am I audible now?
Yes, Purvan, you are audible.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The many facets of I have been explored, and how fascinating it was to listen to Professor Madhucchanda Sen, and many other possibilities which I was just referring to, like the prospect of autobiographical consciousness. For example, the introspecting I in the Notes from Underground of Dostoevsky, and many other respects. So that's it has been a fantastic lecture. I will just request anyone in this forum to raise your questions, observations, and we shall have many more, I think, fabulous discussions over Professor Madhucchanda Sen's lecture.
Purbayon, can I just request first for the students to ask the questions?
Of course,
because
yes. That would be very
it
good.
was really for them.
Yes. The students, research scholars,
And please
anyone.
feel free to ask me questions in Bangla. That's fine.
Yes. Students from any institution, our own students and students from other parts of the Bengal, and if there are students beyond West Bengal, you can ask directly, or you can leave your message in the chat box. I think preferably you can ask directly to Professor Sen.
ম্যাম, আমি তো নেটওয়ার্কের প্রবলেমের জন্য ভালো করে শুনতে পারলাম না। তো আমার একটা প্রশ্ন মনে হচ্ছে যে আপনি কি আই এই লেটারটাকে লজিক্যাল প্রপার নেম হিসেবে ব্যবহার করতে চাইছেন? যেটা রাসেল যেটা ব্যবহার করেছে লজিক্যাল প্রপার নেম হিসেবে?
আমি সঞ্জয়, রাসেল তো এটাকে লজিক্যালি প্রপার নেম বলেই গ্রহণ করেছেন, রাইট?
হ্যাঁ।
এবং সেটা যদি তুমি গ্রহণ করো তাহলে মনে হয় যে এটা যখন একজন ব্যক্তিকে রেফার করে তখন সেই করার ক্ষেত্রে কোনো রকম ডেসক্রিপটিভ কন্টেন্ট সেখানে অ্যাসোসিয়েটেড নেই। ওকে, তাই তো?
আচ্ছা।
এই আইডিয়াটা, রাসেলের এই আইডিয়াটাকে আমি কি করে বুঝবো সেইটা আমার কাছে খুব একটা পরিষ্কার নয়। সেই চিন্তাটাকেই আমি বারবার করে বোঝাবার চেষ্টা করেছি, কেননা আমার মনে হচ্ছে যে এই কথাটা তো আমরা বুঝতে পারছি যে আমরা নিজেদের কাছে একটা বিশেষভাবে উপস্থাপিত হই যখন আমরা আই থট এন্টারটেইন করি। ওকে, এটা আমরা বুঝতে পারছি, কিন্তু তার মানে যে সেখানে কোনো ডেসক্রিপটিভ কন্টেন্ট নেই, এটা কি বলবো? এই সম্বন্ধে আমার একটা সন্দেহ হচ্ছে, এবং সেই সন্দেহটা কেন হচ্ছে সেটা আমি বলার চেষ্টা করেছি।
আচ্ছা, থ্যাংক ইউ ম্যাম।
Anyone else from the student scholar community, student research scholar?
মিউট হয়ে গেছেন আপনি। মিউট হয়ে গেছেন।
I can see.
Yes. Now it's okay.
Yes, Abhijit Bishas has asked a question. What is the difference between Cartesian concept of I and Richard Perry's concept of I? And how does Perry prove that the word I, we are aware? Well, Abhijit, this entire discussion revolves around the Cartesian paradigm. The three things that I at the very beginning mentioned, which seem to be the key elements in the whole literature revolving around the indexical I. One of them is immunity to error through misidentification. Okay, where one is saying that I can never be mistaken about identifying myself. Okay, this is a very Cartesian idea. Okay, now John Ferry, when he is saying that essential index, I is an essential indexical in the sense that no other term can take the place of the I, and in entertaining beliefs which could be expressed only by the use of that indexical, I am aware of myself in a very peculiar way. This peculiar way may be regarded as the Cartesian idea of, self-awareness. It may be,
Yes, ma'am.
So in a way, it is a good idea to, look if Richard Perry's, concept is actually a Cartesian concept. And, the way that I have been questioning it is actually a move away from the Cartesian idea of the self. Does this answer you, Abhijit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Actually, appreciations are pouring all over the chat box. The questions are being in the mind, in the eye, still for the students. They have really liked your lecture.
Maybe
Anyone?
we can now ask.
Yes.
Maybe if there are any other questions from colleagues
Yes,
rather
yes.
than students.
Yes.
Ma'am, this is Orpita. May I ask one question?
Sure, Orpita. Orpita, go ahead. So this is a question from a friend.
Actually, I just want to know that in the case of other perception, when I'm identifying other as other from my own perspective, when I'm identifying the other person as other, quote unquote, I am also identifying myself as I. So my question is, how should I describe this I? Is it indexical I or it is subjective I? Thank you, ma'am.
Orpita, subjective, how are you distinguishing between indexical I and subjective I? Tell me.
Well, actually, I'm describing that when I'm if I call myself as subjective I, then there is a first person stance from my own perspective. Okay, that I'm identifying that I am seeing that person. She is doing that. I am thinking this is our upcoming approach and all. And when I'm
Yeah, I get it. Orpita, at no point am I ready to give up the first person approach. Okay. And we are not really only talking about the first person approach to whatever we experience. We are talking about the use of a first person pronoun, and the use may be made in two different cases. Okay. One is when we are engaging in interpersonal communication. Okay. And the other, which I have been discussing, is in inner speech. Okay, these are the two contexts that I have taken up, where I am really consciously making use of the first person pronoun, right? Okay, you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I am not saying that, I'm not seeing the other from my first person approach, of course. But when I am communicating with the other and I want to tell the other about myself, then what kind of a person am I presenting to that person? Should I be, tied to the first personal experience of my subjectivity when I want to say something about myself to that person? And here I have a very honest confession to make, And I don't know how to get around this. I have to think a little more. I have to be very cautious when I word this even. Is that, there are two things. It is true that I understand that I am an other in the eyes of the other. And I can only be so. Okay. And when I talk about myself, I will always be seen as the other, to the other. Okay. I have to keep that in mind. But I also want the other to appreciate that I am not another to myself. I am myself to myself. Okay. And in a way, somehow, we do get it. We do get it, right? For example, we do get it, and because we get it, we know that we can't expect the other to inflict harm on herself. I cannot expect the other to incriminate herself. Even the laws are like that. Because we know that we have a special kind of love, affinity to ourselves, and we have a special kind of relation to ourselves. This reflexive, awareness of ourselves. We appreciate it. And I just can't get around with this. আমি এটা নিয়ে ভাবছি, আমি এটা বুঝে উঠতে পারছি না যে কিভাবে এই দুটো জিনিসকে একটা নিট থিসিসের মধ্যে আমরা জায়গা দেব. How can we give a place of both these things in a neat thesis about the word I? That at the same time, when I use I and when I say I am in great danger, please come and help me, etc. When I'm saying this, I know that the way that I feel my danger is truly something that the other will never feel. Because I am an other to the other. But I still know that that person will understand that I feel my danger in a very peculiar way. And the person appreciates. And the person comes to help me. So these are these two dimensions. And when Perry and the others are saying that the I is an essential indexical, they seem to be, harping on one of these 2 points. Okay. That when I know that I have been the clumsy shopper, I take action. I take responsibility. I become the agent. Okay. So there is this thing. Ami korlam. Oh baba, eta ami. Okay. But at the same time, I have to present myself to the other as the other. Okay. So I don't know. I find it very complicated.
Professor Madhucchanda wants to
Thank you, ma'am.
So, hello? Sorry, Madhucchanda. So, we may say there is dual I within us. Maybe dual I that is exactly what I am thinking, and the other I that is someone others ascribe to me. And we are in a confused state whether we actually what I am thinking that I is more fundamental, or the someone ascribed to me the I, the characteristics or the properties they seem to possess within the other or the myself. Do you think in this?
Jyotsnadi, এই প্রশ্নটা আমাকেও হাউন্ট করছে. This is haunting me as well. obviously, it seems to me that there is not just one eye inside me. There are layers and layers of eyes, and there are, counterpoints. I understand that. But I'm not quite sure that one of these has a kind of precedence over the others. I don't think so. Okay. I think that the context in which I place myself will tell me which I is more important. Okay. The interpersonal I, when I need to reach out to people, and the personal I, when I need to save myself, to protect myself, to pursue my self-interests, then that attains preference. Okay?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyotsnadi.
Presentation. Thank you for your splendid presentation.
Thank you, Jyotsnadi. Monideepa ma'am, please ask. Professor Monideepa Sen wants to ask a question. Monideepa ma'am, please.
Of course. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Clear.
Yes.
Well, I could have asked a question later on, but I thought that for everybody it may be a good idea to pose a question here itself, or it may be a kind of a remark. So, you are thinking, what I gathered from your talk is that maybe you are still thinking in a traditional framework of how to understand I as a referring expression. And, of course, there are two ways of understanding the I. One, which is like a logically proper name, where there is, and therefore an essential indexical, which does not have any tag of any description attached to it. While in the other case, the I is more like a proper name, where when we are talking about the I, or when we are talking about ourselves, there is a kind of a descriptive content that is creeping into our presenting ourselves as the I, whether to ourselves or to the others. Okay. So the point that you are trying to make is that how we can make sense of this more meaty conception of the I. Now, maybe at this point, in order for you to sort of proceed towards a kind of an answer to the puzzles that you raised, is to maybe change the framework of your understanding of the I, in the sense that it's neither a proper name or it doesn't function either like an essential indexical or like a proper name in our language, and therefore there is no question of giving any descriptive account of what we are, either to ourselves or to others. So what we actually do when we say I am happy, or should I have done this other than that, we are making certain commitments to ourselves which are neither true nor false, neither acceptable or maybe acceptable or unacceptable, but neither not true or false. And the I that figures in that kind of a statement is neither an essential indexical, nor is it a proper name in the ordinary, with a meaty kind of an idea. So my idea would be that this whole discourse centering around the I should maybe brought out of the Russellian, Fregean or Perrian framework and looked into it from a different perspective altogether. So that's what I wanted to sort of, suggest.
Yes, I thoroughly agree with you. And I think that the direction that is possibly emerging out of this is the direction where the I is the agent. Would you agree?
Yeah. And being an agent, therefore, and as you were suggesting, that there is no one way that the I is either presented to myself, or there is no one way that I present myself to the other. So, depending
Right.
on the context in which.
Yeah. What I feel that still I can retain about the essential indexical is that it is only when I entertain a belief involving the indexical that I have the kind of commitment that you were talking about. You see what
okay. Yes.
So, I mean, it is in this sense that it is an essential indexical. Only in this sense.
Yeah.
I mean, only if if I entertain a belief about myself in this way that I can commit myself or would like to commit myself. Okay.
There is one question in the chat box, Madhucchanda, by Dr. Koshi Tharakan.
Is Koshi there? Can I hear you, Koshi,
Yes,
please?
Dr. Koshi Tharakan, can you please ask the question directly?
Thanks a lot, Professor Madhucchanda. It was very interesting listening to you. I was just, when you were trying to explain these two senses of I that you said you are trying to articulate it in the constituents of a language, I was just wondering whether the difference that in Advaita, Mahavakya and Bodhi, between the Anubhava Vakya and Sakshatkara Vakya, Aham Brahmasmi and Ayamanta Brahma. Is there any similarity there? I was just trying to figure out it.
Well, of course, I mean, one of them is an ascription and the other is an identity, right? Okay. So obviously, these distinctions will play a role in our understanding of the essential indexical. One might say that, while we use the essential indexical, there is an identity rather than an ascription. It is not an ascriptive mode. Okay. So, of course, there is a kind of parallel between the two. Yes. Thank you, Koshi.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyone else? May I just ask one small thing, Madhucchanda?
Sure, Purbayan. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. While constructing the I, whether do you think that there is something, an inner language, it is difficult to assume, but whether the language constitutes the structure previously before someone describes oneself, or someone, for example.
Sorry. I am not sure I can hear you properly.
Yeah, for example, if someone writes about himself, about his own events, and in an autobiographical note or in diary, there could be thoughts surrounding himself, and which could be many of the thoughts cannot be expressed in writing. but whether what would be the status of those thoughts? Will there be something still which, in spite of not being expressed, there could be potential that that in some way or another he or she, the agent himself, is begging to express his thoughts, but he is in a quandary, he is in a zone where he can't express, but he wants to express his thoughts. What sort of dilemma do you think that he could be facing? It's just I was thinking about that. Maybe it would be irrelevant to some respect, but as far as the autobiographical consciousness, many things could be surrounding him. Many of the aspects may not be expressed. Maybe they might be left, but could there be potential that in some way or another that could be expressed by the agent?
I don't know if I understood you properly. Were you saying that, you know, when one writes an autobiography, and then there is one at once faces a kind of dilemma, because one is writing about oneself, right? And possibly one has to shift from the first person mode to the third person mode, right?
Yes.
And this shift from the first person mode to the third person mode sort of makes the whole thing kind of problematic.
Yes.
Right. But I think, I mean, yes, indeed, it is problematic. And I don't know, I mean, as you know that there are many philosophers who think that we do not have a self, but we have selves. And possibly the writing, the very exercise of writing an autobiography or writing a diary brings that out very beautifully. And I mean, we might find it difficult to do so, you know, to sort of divide ourselves in, you know, the audience and the person who is seeing myself and the person who's being seen, and the person who knows that who is being seen by himself, etc. There are so many, you know, so many levels to, but it is difficult, but I don't think it's ambiguous if you think that we are different selves, and or even if we are not, we are capable of experiencing these distinctions amongst ourselves, as ourselves, being seen by ourselves, ourselves as seeing ourselves. If we are capable of experiencing these distinctions, I don't think it is an ambiguous situation. It's just a difficult situation.
But it could be resolved still. There will be possibility.
I mean, if there's a problem, there is, we need a resolution. But I mean, one has to tell me what the problem is.
No, I have got the idea from you.
You know that self-deception is an area in philosophy of mind and philosophy of psychology, which again is a very crucial area where these kinds of problems crop up.
Yes, I have got the idea from your answer. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Yes, anyone else, please comment or question. Whether there is any question or not. Jhareshwar Da, do you like to comment? Sadek, Shampa, Jhareshwar Da is on, yes.
Actually, Madhucchanda, when I am asking who am I, at the time, what is your response? As you know me, yes, as you know me, so, how can you relate in a philosophical dimension?
Dharishar, this is the most difficult question in the whole world. Who am I? Well, it depends upon whether I'm calling you over the phone, or I'm supposed to, deliver a very meaningful lecture. That it depends on that. Okay.
Okay.
And whether I'm calling you or I'm calling my son's school, or I am calling Airtel customer care, or I am speaking in a feminist forum, the answer will differ.
Okay, Didi.
মানে আমি কখনো বলবো যে আমার আপনাদের কাছে একটা পোস্টপেড প্ল্যান আছে, আমি মধুচন্দা সেন with the postpaid plan, so and so. কখনো কখনো আমি বলবো যে আমি অর্ক সেন চক্রবর্তীর মা কথা বলছি, ওর স্কুল ইউনিফর্মের দরকার। হু আর ইউ এর প্রশ্ন নানা রকম উত্তর হতে পারে। আবার কখনো খুব গম্ভীর গলায় আমি বলতে পারি যে আমি একজন নারী, এটা বলতে পারি। প্রশ্নকর্তা কি, প্রশ্নর কনটেক্সট কি, এটা বুঝে বলবো।
Okay. Contextual way.
I think if there are no more questions.
Yes, Purbayan, it is already 7. You can't expect people to listen to me anymore.
No, it's been a great time. And Josadi, want to ask something?
বলছি 2 ঘন্টা হয়ে গেল পূর্বায়ন।
Now, so I invite our dear colleague Shampa Rai to extend the formal vote of thanks. And once again, we are grateful to Professor Madhucchanda Sen for your excellent presentation. Shampa, please.
Before Shampa, can I say thank you to all of you?
Of course.
Well, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to all my friends in Gour Banga Vishwavidyalaya and to all philosophy lovers who have gathered here and made our quarantine days a little bearable. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We are very much grateful. Thank you, Didi.
It is just formal vote of thanks to all. Thank you, Dr. Purbayan Jha, for giving me this opportunity to offer a vote of thanks on this program. On behalf of the Department of Philosophy, University of Gour Banga, I would like to thank Professor Madhucchanda Sen for her wonderful lecture on the name I call myself. It's really a very interesting lecture and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you so much, Madam, for being with us and deliver such a wonderful lecture. Thank you. I express my sincere thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Chanchal Choudhury, for his support to organize this special lecture. I must thank to the coordinator of our department, Dr. Purbayan Jha, for his great initiative to organize this program. I extend my thanks to all our colleagues, Dr. Sukumar Chandra Roy, Professor Jhareshwar Ghosh, Dr. Shadet Ali, and Professor Joshna Shaha for their cooperation. I express my heartfelt thanks to all the renowned persons who joined with us today, Professor Amita Chatterjee, Professor Sharad Deshpande, Professor Nirmal Kumar Roy, Professor Monideepa Sen, and all the teachers from different universities and colleges for their great participation. I really thank all of them. I must thanks to all the research scholars and students from our university and other universities and colleges who participate in this program. Thank you, all of you. And I must thanks, and even we all are grateful this online platform Google Meet who join us together. And thank you once again, Professor Sen, for spending time with us. And thank you once again, all of you. Thank you very much, and good night to all of you.
Thank you. Namaskar. Please take care.
Purvan.
Yes, yes.
Hello, Purvan.